Welcome everybody back to How We Heal with Dr. Maria. Super excited to get going on this. And I already hear a dog. That's so cool. My
That's my
favorite.
little guy.
Okay,
Come here.
guys. I have to admit, this is going to be an interesting show, and it's going to be a conversation style. And you know, really first before we get started, definitely make sure that you have hit subscribe and that you're getting the notifications, because you guys, it's going to be great. I'm telling you, in the next few months and years, it's just these amazing people like who I have on tonight. Forrest Lang, he's an author, he's a veteran, and he's a survivor, and his book is called Angel Blue Book.
Angel Blue, a song of redemption.
Okay.
Yeah, my social media handle is Angel Blue Book. Go ahead.
Okay, so on Instagram, you will find him at Angel Blue Book. So I wanted to read something really quick. It's from his Instagram page. It's one of his highlights. You guys will find it there. It says, Angel Blue is about my journey through recovery from severe child abuse and the aftermath. From a layman's perspective, I relate recovery through 12-step addiction work, transformational workshops, therapy, meditation, and study. My life is very good today, and I share how I got here, with no assumption that my life is or ever will be perfect. Is any of ours perfect? What does that even mean? Right, Forrest, welcome to How We Heal with Dr. Maria, Forrest.
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you. Thanks for holding this space.
Bro, like, your Instagram page just gets me almost every day. Like, I think the first few, before I was like getting used to the energy there, I was like really like emotional,
Mhm.
and then just kind of learning more about you and just kind of getting to hear what you're about. You're strong, bro. I know it took a lot for you to get there. So this one of the description you have, you said, let's unravel this shit together on
Yeah.
Instagram. I love that. So
Well, there's not a lot of room. Like there isn't a lot of room. So how do we make room? Um, and I might make people upset by saying this, but especially for men. Women have created spaces, and I copied what you guys did, but it's kind of awkward, right? And how do we make a space for men to talk about childhood trauma? It's such a taboo. And
well, you're doing a good job.
thank you.
You
It feels.
know,
Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, you were comparing men and women, and as a woman, I really feel like that the space that you did create was very masculine, and that I feel that men could relate and kind of hop on and go, okay, I get this. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, sometimes it feels a little bit awkward because I'm just shouting out into a crowd the giant melting pot of social media about recovery from some really cringy, dark stuff that's hard to look at. And people react differently to it. But for every negative reaction, there's 35 positive reactions. And I continually get to call on my courage because I'm afraid and I'm uncomfortable to continue walking the path that I'm walking.
That was going to be one of my questions. Do you remember that moment you said to yourself, no more, no effing more? Like, I'm done with this. I want to have a better life. I want to better myself. I'm not saying I don't even know where you were at, but you did bring up addiction,
Mm-hmm.
so you must have had some trials with addiction. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Was always in a lot of pain. From as long as I can remember in my life, there was deep pain inside. And my experience with alcohol was the first opportunity I ever had to feel any relief from that pain. And that was one of the first times where I said, no, I'm not going to live this way anymore. I'm done with this because I'm done hurting. And the ability to have some anesthetic earlier on in life saved my life.
Yeah.
And it worked until it didn't work anymore. And I got better tools.
I love
So
that
that
because you acknowledge that it worked, and we
Mhm.
see it in a lot of people that are in pain, or I do in my position, seeing as a practicing chiropractor, people come in with a lot of different things, and it might be like using the joke factor or whatever, but people use alcohol for a lot of pain relieving, whether it be physical or emotional or whatever.
Well, and I think that a lot of times addiction can be a symptom of a moral injury or a spiritual wound inflicted very early in life. And there's that old like tattoo flash on the wall, drink to forget, right? The only problem is as soon as that booze goes away, the pain comes right back. And so how do we learn how to manage life and alleviate suffering without the use of chemicals?
Agreed. I completely agree. I mean, if you've ever been to the chiropractor, that's where we come from. No drugs, no surgery. And, trying to teach people many different coping tools that they can have like really quick, that they have with them at home or wherever they're at.
Mhm.
Um, do you want to take, I don't know how far back you want to go for our audience to kind of just give them a little bit about yourself and just sort of, I read that, but like, where did things start? Because, okay, partly why I want to do this, and there might be a part two with you because there's so much to talk about, but you and I had a back and forth on Instagram about one of the posts that I posted about, abuse on internet with children.
Mhm.
And you had basically said, like, people are more comfortable or whatever, talking about their dogs or whatever than they are.
It's easier to get people to care about animals.
Yeah,
And I care deeply about animals,
same. Yeah.
but it's not as difficult to see an animal suffering and want to go donate to a charity or go to the pound and get that dog. Um, it's not as emotionally excruciating to see that as it is to see a child being abused. We have a very tough time handling that level of ugliness. And so we avoid. And because we culturally avoid, that opens space for horrific things to continue happening to children. And we culturally get to become resilient enough to look at that and deal with it. And that is part of my mission, to make the space to open it up. And people may say overshare, or I don't want to hear that. Why would you tell me something like that? That makes me feel bad. Well, how do you think it feels for somebody living that if it hurts you that much just to hear about it? And are you willing to do something about it?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be full transparency here. I knew that I was going to ask you to do this. I knew it was coming. I knew tonight was coming. And like maybe an hour before, I knew it was after patients and stuff, I started getting a little anxiety. And I even shared that with a few people, my
Mhm.
sister and some friends and stuff. And I was like, oh, it just hit me. I'm getting a little nervous because this topic is very harsh to talk about.
Mhm.
And so thank you for doing this. But it's like, it's happening everywhere. Like we were talking about on the Instagram, foster care, churches, schools, you name it. CP
Biological homes too, in care, out of care, juvenile
at the
detention.
freaking border right
Yeah.
now. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we I'm sure you and I will probably get a little passionate in this discussion.
Well, we also have to be careful when we're having public conversations, how much of the scope of the problem we go into. because how much can a person digest? And when we start talking too much about the deep, large problem, people shut down and say, oh, conspiracy theory or crazy. It's just too much. So what I've found is that I have an easier time engaging if I parcel it out a little bit at a time.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance is no joke. It's there, even me just having that initial, weird feeling like, um, as a practitioner, we are obligated by law. We're mandated reporters. If we see something, we have to report it. Luckily, I have never had to. For some reason, I've never seen something yet, and I don't want to. But it's like, even then, I imagine myself like having that question in my head, or that second guessing, like, wait, did I just see what I just saw? Wait, should I be asking more questions here? Like, wait a minute. You know what I mean? Did I just see the bruises the way I saw them? Or, there would be that initial second guessing, because it's like, no, like not believing that it's happening. You know what I mean? And
Well, and there's also, unfortunately, a weighing out of what's the bigger evil, because my experience within Child Protective Services in the United States, my limited experience of what I've lived in when I was a ward of the state, and what I have seen still going on, is that it is not anything nice to be in care. It's still not anything nice. And we only give, many times now, there are good foster parents. There are workers that care, but that whole system is operated in a scarcity poverty mentality. And for anyone who knows what it's like to live in poverty, poverty itself is traumatic. And when we treat our youth who are without parents and without support, if we inflict poverty upon them, it's very damaging for them moving forward as well. And I think California is doing a little bit better of a job right now than it was in the 90s, but we still have a long, long way to go. And is it worse to be in foster care to get beat up? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, exactly. I don't know either. Well,
It was better for me because I was experiencing severe physical abuse. I had a limp by the time I was 8 years old from my stepdad hitting me so hard. And my brother had already been molesting me for as long as I can remember. And when I was very young, there's flashes of uglier things happening to me that I see when I'm in therapy doing EMDR, and a lot of it's body memory, but there is some physical memory of gross things. And the religious abuse, the racism, the consistent fear that I was in, that I was isolated from the world. I was afraid to do anything wrong. I felt horrible all the time. I believed I was going to hell because my brother was molesting me, and that's against the Christian stuff. The world was bad and it was going to end, and demons were going to get me. I mean, it was a terrifying existence. And when I entered care, really all I had to deal with was one person molesting me. That was it. And so it was easier for me, in a better situation, even though it was still a very horrible situation.
yeah, the lesser of, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, can you tell us what inspired the book?
So there were a couple things. One, I started practicing meditation when I was 38 years old.
Mhm.
I had already been sober since I was 23, and my life fell apart. I was doing what I thought everything was, I was doing what I thought was the right thing. And I made excuses for myself for the things that I did that weren't right, where I was honest unless it had to do with relationships. I was very hardworking and I was very involved in the sober community and involved with being of service all the time and didn't really understand what self-care was, didn't understand a lot about emotional intelligence. And I just thought that if I worked hard enough and made enough money, then everything would be okay. And when everything fell apart in 2015, I found myself in the middle of a 90-day long flashback, and I lost 40 pounds in 90 days. Four of my teeth came out of my head. I lost teeth. I couldn't sleep. And I felt such a tremendous pain. And I didn't want to drink because I've been sober for so long. And I didn't want to commit suicide, but I wanted the pain to end. And I found myself in a place where I didn't feel like I could go on any longer. And I sought treatment and went to a 5-day program called Sable Warrior, where we revisited meditation again. When I was in early sobriety, I was playing with a gun and I accidentally killed my best friend. And had a lot of flashbacks, screaming flashbacks. And those only happened when I was still. And so I was afraid to meditate because I didn't want those flashbacks to happen and to start screaming again. And after all this time, after avoiding being still for 16 years, I was able to sit with other veterans and practice meditation. And that had a ginormous impact on my life. And I had a lot to rebuild. But when I got to a place where I felt that life was good, that I looked around at my life and I said, holy crap, I made it. I made it through all this stuff. And here I am enjoying a spectacular life, being a working artist. I live right next to the ocean. My daughter lives with me full time. I'm happily with my partner that we've been together for a long time. And my friends are still dying. And my friends are still not talking about this. And they're still overdosing on drugs. And I started looking around for survivors. Have you heard of Bertie Moses?
Mhm.
So there was a cult in the 70s in Philadelphia, and the police actually dropped a firebomb on top of this building where this cult was operating, and it shot at the police. And they had maybe 30 children inside, um, something around 100 adults, and only one child made it out, and his name was Bertie Moses. And one adult made it too, and I don't, whatever. But I was like, wow, I would love to speak to this man because I know that that cult did things to kids that happened to me, and I want to know how he is now. And so I did a little bit of research and looked for him, and he joined the army and became a truck driver. And then he drowned to death in a hot tub when he was almost 40 years old.
Mm.
And the more I kept looking around at stories like that and seeing that I am an elder for what I've gone through, that a lot of people don't make it this far, I felt that it was my duty and my obligation to mark my steps. Does that make sense? Is that
Yes.
too, it's not too
No.
long of an explanation.
No, it completely makes sense. And in so doing, there is another healing there, you know?
Mhm.
You did, started meditation, doing all these things to heal, stop drinking, but it's like when you write a book, that is like, I mean, yeah, some of the things are having to come back up and stuff probably. I haven't had a chance to yet. I'm getting it. I'm gonna get that book. We just did this so fast, I hadn't had a chance to yet. But I think that that was such a great tool for you to have, to get it all out once and for all, and then to
Mhm,
be able to help people.
mhm.
Because when we that moment when we decide something's wrong and then we want the healthier coping mechanisms, helping people is such a huge one. You get to
Well, there
step
was
outside of yourself and, you know.
there was still a large level of avoidance, even with all the recovery and stuff that I did, and even meditating and learning how to experience hyperreality, hyperpresence. I I can sit long enough that I can feel my heartbeat and feel everything happening around me and hear and see better. I don't have as much of a problem with physical pain anymore since I've been meditating. But the problem and the issue with childhood trauma is that there are many actions that we do that we're not aware we're doing. So I may have relationship dynamics that I'm unaware that I'm having that are unhealthy. I may Money's a really easy way because everybody has a basic understanding of money, right? So if I have a core belief that I have $50 in my checking account, and that's my core belief that that's what I have, and something happens and I get a speeding ticket and I have to pay $400. So I'm $350 negative in my checking account. I will work my butt off to get back up to 50 bucks, right? I will do whatever it takes to get up to 50 bucks. The only problem with that setting is that if I win the lottery tomorrow and I get $10 million, I will work my butt off to get back down to 50 bucks because that's my core belief.
Yeah,
And
limiting core belief, yeah.
yes, and when I have limiting core beliefs that I am unlovable, that people aren't safe, that somebody's going to hurt me, that I can't trust, these are things that are just in the room. They've been in the room a long time. They've been here so long that they're invisible. And I get to continually work on those things even today in my life. Because if I'm not continually working towards improving, things fall apart fast.
Bro, yeah, that's what this is all about. It's a journey for healing, and that's exactly what this show's about. I wanted to know, what does angel blue mean to you? I
So
wore
there's a whole
this top because I was like, okay, we're gonna represent tonight.
that's a beautiful color. So there's a whole chapter that I wrote about that called The Blue Angel. The short of it is that God, what's this guy's name? He wrote a book called Entangled, and his name is Graham Hancock. And Graham Hancock has like a TV show about ancient aliens or something like that.
Yeah.
So I decided to go on a trip on my motorcycle when everything was falling apart in my life, but I had started meditating again, and I just looked at my life and I was like, this whole thing sucks. I don't like it. And I just left it. My business, my relationships, um, where I lived, everything. I just left it all and I had nothing. And I got on my motorcycle and I rode up to northern Nevada to go to Burning Man. And I brought a book with me to read because I had no idea what Burning Man was going to be like. And so I start reading this book by Graham Hancock. And in the beginning, there's a girl that I don't like, and she's driving a Mercedes. She's honking a horn to get the boy she just slept with to open the gate of the mansion up in Malibu. And she's drunk and high. And she drives out and gets pulled over and goes home and snorts an oxy and ODs. And I'm like, what is this story that I'm reading? I'm sitting next to my motorcycle in the desert, like reading the story. And then she starts to die. And then a blue angel appears before her. And it's the same blue angel that appeared before her and took her hand and took her away from her body when her dad was raping her. And that blue angel just took her away every single time. And I stopped because it was really emotional for me, because I remember disassociating very young when bad things were happening. And as I put the book down, I look at my backpack sitting next to my motorcycle in the dust, and there's a little sleeve for my name tag, and it's a backpack I had in the war in Iraq, and I carry it with me all the time. I always had this backpack with me. I keep my drawing stuff in it. I took it with me to Burning Man, and there was a piece of paper in it, and I pulled out the piece of paper, and I opened it up, and there was a blue angel watermark on this piece of paper, and there was a note from my daughter that said, "Dad, I love you." But the note was 4 years old. It had been sit. She just slipped it in my backpack when she was little. And so to me, I believe that sometimes people in our life can be there with us before they're born. And that sometimes they may grab our hand and pull us away. So my daughter's my blue angel. That's
Love it.
pretty much. I'm here. My little doggy's whining.
I've got one on laying down on the floor too here.
Look at you. Come here. Okay.
I
And
didn't,
if
I
I
didn't,
call him, he'll go lay down.
yeah, I didn't hear it, and it's fine. I love dogs. So, wow, 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 and wow.
Kind of a long explanation. And I
No,
didn't used to be able to tell that story without crying.
uh, cry away. You're great with stories, because I'm just sitting here going, um, okay. Of course, I've been following you, and I wanted to mention this because this show is about healing, and we want other people to maybe glean something. And I know that I don't want to say you've mentored, because I don't know, but you have literally gone and been invited to large groups of active duty, maybe veterans, I don't know, but you're actually going out and talking to people. And I think you were at Camp Pendleton maybe a few months ago. I don't know. You said San Diego, so I was just like,
I was at North Island.
okay.
At MOD. Yeah.
So how did that go? Like, what
I
response
was
did you
so
get?
scared. I was
I
so
remember you
scared to
saying
do
that.
because I'm talking to them at like a safety brief, and those are super boring. And they have to sit there all day in this auditorium and listen to people. And I'm like, holy fuck, I'm gonna go share about what happened to me, because it's so hard to disclose in the military. It's so hard. And the numbers, according to rain.org, 1 in 4 girls experienced sexual violence before they turned 18, and 1 in 6 boys. And I don't know the accuracy of those numbers, because that's a lot of people. But even if it was only 1 in 50, there were still 1,000 people in that room. Even if it was only 1 in 100, there were 1,000 people in that room.
Yeah.
And I know how difficult it is to face that problem. That one in particular, when I got molested, there was this ugly feeling that I felt. It's the ugliest feeling. It's like a dusty death, lonely, sad, unlovable, empty, hollow feeling. And I know that other people have felt that and flashed back to that feeling. That's a feeling that can stay, not all the time, but it can appear in our life. It could be there under the surface. We could be drinking it away. It's a very deep wound. And how do I make that okay to talk about it, to talk about in front of that many people? And so I presented as suicide prevention and resilience training. And I taught a little bit of a meditation. I talked to them a little bit about myself and why I was there, my military history. We did a short meditation, and then I just told them a story. I told them about the time I was in my foster mom's bed. It was 6:01 p.m. I was naked. I was 13 years old, and my foster mom's husband came home from work every day at 6:30. And she told me that what we were doing was illegal and we would both go to jail if we got caught, and that if her husband found out, that he would hurt me. And the front door opened at 6:01 and he wasn't supposed to be home until 6:30. And I was in a bedroom on a bed with no clothes on, with my clothes scattered all over the floor, and same with her. And I grabbed my little t-shirt and jeans and my sneakers and socks, and I belly crawled out of her bedroom into the hallway, into the bathroom, and I closed the door just as she walked by. And I was in such terror in that moment. I didn't know if she got into the bathroom on time, if I had left an article of clothing, if he could smell something, if this was going to be where my 13-year-old life ended. And I was shaking and sweating, and I waited for I don't know how long, and nothing happened. Didn't hear any noise. And so I turned the knob, opened the door, peeked out, and I walked out into the hallway, into the living room, sat down, and I turned on the TV and waited to see if I was going to live or die. Waited to see if he knew, and he went out in the kitchen and everything seemed normal. And as I was sitting there, a bead of sweat formed in my armpit and dripped down my side. And I'm sweating right now talking about that. And I used to be so ashamed of having sweaty armpits, because it reminded me of being that helpless, terrified young teenager. One of my aha moments, I was getting sober again. And I told this guy my story, whatever I remembered of it. This guy, Sandy, he just let me talk all day in his car after an AA meeting. And we got to the mall, and I was like, and my armpits are sweating, and I don't give a fuck. Like, I said it like super loud to the mall, and people didn't even react, you know? Some of those things are just the shame that we can carry.
Well, you're talking about a sympathetic response, fight or flight. And it sounds like you helped yourself to calm down a little bit by teaching yourself meditation and connection with people, like the person that you
Those,
got to.
those sailors, after I gave my talk, I didn't talk that long. I didn't go off that. I only had 20 minutes total to
Yeah.
speak. They
Okay.
stood up and gave me a standing ovation. They were so sweet.
Wow. And then did you go to another group as well? And have you been keep getting invited back, or?
Well, I've been volunteering for a long time.
Okay.
I've been volunteering in vet work ever since 2015. I've been volunteering in AA since 2000, right? Like, when people join AA, they pick up cigarette butts and they start, people learn how to be of service in 12-step groups. And I spoke a lot in meetings, in AA meetings. I would be a main speaker, but never outside of AA. And so I knew this girl. She was a terrific dancer. She worked at a strip club. One of my homegirls worked down there. And this girl was, I don't really like going to the strip club. It's never been my thing, but I went down there because my friend had always wanted somebody to make it rain on her. So I brought $100 in ones and I made it rain on her and made her all happy. And then I saw her friend, who was just like an acrobat, right? And she could get on a pole and walk on the ceiling. She did all these amazing like tricks. And I was like, wow, this person's a terrific dancer. I'm like, why don't you do this outside with clothes on, right? You probably make more money. Like, you could be in the circus. And she said, I'm just really comfortable here dancing. I am afraid to go in front of a different crowd where they're going to judge me. And So when I spoke at that military base, I felt like a stripper dancing outside of the strip club because I'm used to being in the 12-step groups where it doesn't matter. Like there's such a low expectation of a speaker. And there's a lot of terrific speakers in those 12-step groups. But it was very scary and very outside of my comfort zone. Being of service, like volunteering, is very much within my comfort zone now. I'm going out to Focus Marines Foundation in a week, and I'll spend 7 days volunteering for whatever they need, whatever we need to do to make this program happen. And I haven't volunteered with this particular organization yet. I was a participant, but not a volunteer or mentor. And I'm not nervous. I feel like I'll just be able to go and fit in and follow the standard operating procedure, and I get along well with the guys. But speaking and expanding out that comfort zone is not easy. I hope not getting off track.
No, you're not. But it's also your mission, right? You're
Mhm.
saying, Maria, I want to do this as my mission. It's my mission to make space,
Mhm.
but creating that space is gonna be hard and difficult, and you're doing something hard and difficult. And
Well, and we get to join first, right? Like maybe what I want doesn't exist right now. Exactly what I want doesn't exist, but there's things that are close, and I get to join those things so I can learn how to operate better to create my own.
I think you actually already are creating it, by the way, Forrest, because the next question I wanted to ask you is, are the Instagram videos helping you? They're rather short. You put some great music and verbiage to it, and it's short and concise. And I'm just I'm just sitting there going, wow, Semper Fi.
Yeah, they're the stuff that I need to hear.
Mhm.
What I need to hear, what I needed to hear, what I wanted to hear, what would make 20-year-old Forrest feel some relief. And when other people respond, yeah, it helps me a lot because we heal together. We don't do this stuff alone.
No,
And there's exchange happening all the time.
definitely energy exchange for sure. Let's get to some of the healing part of this. I'm not that you have to go deep into 12 step, in detail, because I'm sure everyone gets that, but like you're saying, I want you to know where I'm at now. My life is very good today, and I share how I got here. Yeah, you shared some things. Is there anything else that you're maybe left out, or any writing
Well,
help? Yeah.
people want like a fancy shiny answer, right? Like
Mhm.
this is the button, this is the turning point, this is the nugget. And I haven't found recovery of this type to be that way. I found it to be a very slow road and a combination of a lot of things. So holistic, right? Um, Participating in holistic healing, be it acupuncture, lodge, ayahuasca, uh, energy healing, and then in the middle, the the stuff that's not necessarily like 100% medical science, but the therapy stuff, where I go see a doctor of psychology, and that person practices EMDR, and I do that processing. And then the study part, where I learn practices in my life that are beneficial and pillars, staples of life. So the 5 pillars of self-care. It took me 2 years in therapy to learn the 5 pillars of self-care and what they mean. So eat, right? And that looks different with each phase of life.
Yeah.
I have sometimes I have had a difficult time eating, where I've lost a lot of weight because it's just hard to eat food. So eat the food, right? Get the right amount of sleep
Mhm.
for me. Get some exercise, whatever that looks like,
Mhm.
hygiene and medical care,
Okay.
and self-love. So if those 5 things are not happening in my life, I mean, maybe I can do okay if just maybe one of them is not happening. Like, let's say we got a table with 5 legs and we take away one leg. We're still kind of balancing. We're not as stable, right? But I take another one away, and then we've only got 3, and then we're more wobbly. And then if I take another one, we're gonna fall. So I get to continue to practice those things on a regular basis. And after that, I get to practice the 5 pillars of servant leadership. So forgive me if I forget one because I'm on the spot, but being of service on a regular basis in some way, like my physical body or energy is serving others in some way that serves the highest good of my community. Continually studying, listening to other people, reading books that have ideas that didn't originate in my own mind. Contribution, so giving a portion of what my money, my income, my gold, right? Sharing a portion of that with people who do work that I support. Service, study, contribution, acknowledgement. So noticing what and who is in my life. This rose right here is so beautiful and it smells so good. And look at how green the green is and how pink the petals are. And wow, this is really gorgeous. All the time and attention that went into growing and creating and cultivating this flower that I could buy at the store with money that I made and bring home to my partner so she could be happy,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So practicing and noticing who and what is in my life and articulating to myself or to them on a regular basis what I appreciate about them. And then finally, acknowledgement, affirmation, or prayer. Um, so some people choose to pray to God or a deity, or people have different religious practices. But at the same time, if we don't have one, or even if we do and we choose to use affirmation or spoken word, is the strongest thing that a human being has. No other creature has the ability to take our ideas, form them into sound, and put them in vibration that goes out into the world. It's a very, very powerful tool that human beings possess. And oftentimes, those of us who have been traumatized misuse or are unaware that our spoken word is harming us. Because if I say, I am stupid, I am a loser, I am never going to get over this, it's not going to be okay. I'm going to be alone. If I say those things, my body follows that intention and those words, and it hurts me and it hurts people around us. So my practice is that every single word I say is a prayer. Every word that comes out of my mouth is for the highest good of myself and those around me. And that's a tough one to remember because I talk all the time, right? And sometimes other people help me. When I say something negative about myself, like, I'm not that smart, so, and one of my friends, pretty recently, he looked at me with tears in his eyes because we're on the same path, and he's another brother in my vet group, and he said, Forrest, it hurts me so bad when you say that. It hurts me to see you say that you're not smart. You are smart. Maybe you dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, and maybe you don't have the same education as me and as others, but you are not stupid, bro. And it infuriates me that you would disregard a gift of intelligence by saying that you're stupid. And I was like, oh man, I did that, right? And that's another thing in the room that I didn't notice that I was doing.
But it's so obvious that you have done a lot of the shadow work, you know, I mean, just the words that are coming out of your mouth are just, it's just right on. It feels good. It resonates with me. And, you know, we're all healing from something, you know, not negating your situation or, you know, what you've gone through, but it's like all of these things that you mentioned can help anyone, you know,
Mhm.
get through some tough, shitty ass times, you know. Um, you'd brought up some other things that we wanted to kind of chat about. Um, and I didn't quite know what you meant by initiation
So initiation is an
for you.
old technology
Mhm.
that is found in all prehistoric cultures of humans. So indigenous humans before, so humanity didn't start in the Middle East. That's not where humanity started. That's where civilization started. So they call it the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia near Iraq. And people argue about the times. Our best guess, as far as I know, is about 10,000 years ago, people figured out how to start farming and how to store wheat and dry meat. They put salt on meat, dry it, and that created a currency for human beings. So there were people who had and people who didn't have. Before that, people kind of just all had the same, lived in tribes. And we followed. I'm not saying life was better or worse back then or whatever, right? But we lived in groups of about 80 and we just did stuff because that's what human beings did. We just human instinct. And one of the things that we did when we were living that way is when a youngster reaches the age of puberty, they go through a ceremony, and it's different, usually different for males and females. All the ceremonies, the requirements, and what they did, the person was taken out of the tribe. And so they only saw, they were alone or they only saw their leaders, the elders. They were guided by elder wisdom, taken to a ground that was considered sacred or important. They faced their own death and they received a transitional object like a spear or a tattoo or a robe or a something. And taking that old technology and applying it today does something to the human psyche. It clicks something that makes everything else flow more easily in growth and healing and awareness. Many people, all of us are asleep on some level, right? Like I don't know any human being, and there's like this joke about fucking wokeness and all this stuff, like woke. That's become like a political buzzword used by one side to attack another side, right?
Mhm.
But there is varying levels of subconscious awareness, and many people, most of us, are driven by our subconscious so much that we only make 5% of our own decisions consciously. And when we expand that conscious decision, right, as opposed to subconscious or unconscious activity, we can change the course of our life drastically. And some people don't need to, and that's fine. This guy really needed to, because every time I read some backstory about a real or fictional supervillain, they have my backstory. And I don't want to be a supervillain. I don't want to be a bad guy. I fit the profile of a serial killer with all the horror and the loneliness and the ugliness and even the way I acted in my teens and 20s. I was so hurt and so angry and so psycho that I hurt people around me. And I don't want that for my life. I want a good life. And I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. We were talking about initiation and,
So
what that meant for you and how it's
initiation was very helpful for me to be able to expand. And I don't understand enough about my brain and the psyche to really articulate that like a doctor. But I know that I went from boy to man in 5 days. That the impact that that particular experience had on me will stay with me forever. And I'm so grateful that I had that.
interesting. Okay.
If you look up on YouTube, there was a documentary about Save a Warrior done, and it was back in the early days. And this CNN reporter was asking Jake Clark, how many of the people who came through your program were suicidal? And he said, 500. And she said, all of them were suicidal when entered your program. And he said, yeah. And she said, how many of them are still alive today? And he said, 500. So that is just 100% incredible that many suicidal people would go through who were going to die, and boom, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They,
So that was the program that you're talking about that you did, that
yeah.
initiation. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, I know we're kind of coming up on an hour here, but I wanted to
That
ask.
doesn't feel like it.
I
Great.
know. That's why I'm thinking there might need to be a part two. What book are you reading right now?
I started reading. I have to look in my Kindle.
No, that's okay. This show is all to help people, so I'm like, I want to know what he's reading.
I'm reading one that's kind of making me mad right now.
Okay. Well,
Um,
what genre is it?
it is called, how do I get back to the How to Do the Work, Recognize Your Patterns, Heal from Past, and Create Yourself by Dr. Nicole. I have to screenshot this to get it close enough to see it.
Oh, it's okay.
Dr. Nicole LaPera. She is the holistic psychologist on social media.
Okay.
She has like a bajillion followers. And when I was first getting on Instagram, I asked a question on her page and she answered me in like a really snarky and entitled way of somebody who is privileged. And I got so mad. And I was like, whatever, I don't even ever want to see or talk to you again. And I was talking to my friend last night. He's like, you need to read this book. It's really good. And I started to read it. And I was like, this privilege. Like I started to get irritated. And so I know that I am absolutely 100% supposed to read that book and listen to what she has to say,
Mhm.
because it's hard for me to hear and it makes me angry.
Yeah.
And when that little boy Forrest, who didn't have anything to eat, gets mad and gets riled up, it's because it's something that's going to help him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So check out the holistic psychologist.
I am. I wrote it down. That sounds great. I mean, well, as we come to a close, I want you to share two things. First, what's your next biggest project? And second, is there any last words that you have for anyone that might be going through some harsh ass shit? You know?
So my next big project is whole heart tattoo. And I will create a nonprofit funded by a for-profit to cover and remove tattoos, human trafficking tattoos, abuser tattoos, marks that people have on themselves left by somebody who did something awful to them, so that they can have something beautiful instead, or nothing there at all. To people listening, man, it's so hard. There's so many different people at a lot of different levels of recovery and awareness around trauma. And if there's somebody who's listening who hasn't visited this at all, I just want to say that I believe you. You are worthy of love. Your voice matters. you matter as a human being, and that there is hope. Like there's a lot of hope, even if it feels like just everything's all bad and you're cursed and just bad things are going to keep happening and nothing is ever going to work out for you. I'm telling you, there's hope. There's hope to have a good and positive existence. For something I wanted to say earlier is stop apologizing. That's something that I learned pretty recently, that when I over apologize for myself and for my space, that I attract predators to me. So
You leave
if
that, it's like a portal that's left open, you know?
fuck yeah, it is.
Yeah.
If somebody sees me with my head down saying sorry all the time and they are that predator, that person, they will be drawn to that because they know that they can victimize me
Oh yeah.
because I'm
That
sorry. Because I'm
like
sorry that I'm even here.
it's like built into the narcissist DNA or something. They can
Mhm.
smell that a mile away.
And there is infinite abundance in the world.
Agreed.
We're really the only people that say we own property. Like we own something and we create that.
Mhm.
We create wealth, we create community, we create and I'm not a fucking millionaire. Like I have the magic keys to the kingdom. But I do know that there is abundance out there. And I came from a place of very, very poor poverty mentality, scarcity mentality, a negative mindset about the world. And it's taken me some time. Hopefully, somebody else could do it faster because we have more access to information today. But more and more, that version of myself that doesn't feel good enough to stand next to the holistic psychologist is going away. It,
Good.
it becomes lesser, and it's not even that it's going away. It's a little version of myself that's hurting, and in meditation, I get to go and rescue that little person and carry that little guy into the treehouse and tell him that he's okay and give him what he needs.
Yeah, definitely. Um, First of all, I want to say thank you for hopping on with me for so long tonight. It's the evening. We're both on Pacific Standard Time. I want to say thank you to your partner. It looks like she keeps walking back and forth. It's the evening, so I know it's family time. So thank you guys to the both of you for spending time with us. There's probably going to be a part two because I'm going to be so curious in the near future as to all the things that you mentioned. Whole heart tattoo. I want to know how that's going. I'm sure you and I will communicate as to the next time we have you on. But I want to end with another quote. I'm guessing it's from your book, but you do have it as one of your highlights on Instagram. You said, "It usually doesn't get better. You get better." My
Mhm.
first line.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and put Forrest's information in the description. So don't worry about that. You'll be able to find him wherever you'll be able to find his book. And I strongly suggest that you go buy that book. And I believe that your story can help anyone. So thank you again.
Thank you, Doc.